It may be that nothing signified a greater change in our lives than the acquisition of a cat. It is probably specious to do so, but I link the Latin word for cat, feles, with the Latin word for happy or prosperous, which is felix. The word felix has its etymological roots in a word meaning to bear or to produce, and so is linked to fruit-bearing and childbearing. The cat is therefore a sign of fecundity, and its arrival in the house was a blessing that our first child was to be born soon after. Here he lies and plays on an oriental carpet, orange on sober red. By turns he chooses to be frenetic and indifferent, relaxed and inquisitive. On a cold winter horizon he is a beacon of fire. In March 1975, we returned to wild Wales and noticed these specks swinging about the heavens. I was less interested in what birds they were than in the way they moved in the sky. My camera framed it as a fluid, dynamic space. Within the four sides of the frame, it has a two-dimensional quality, but camera movement and the zoom lens subverted that, turning it into 3 dimensions, moving sideways, moving upwards, zooming in, zooming out. And into this idyll came ravens, I think, to harass and bedevil the buzzards, to engage in their dive-bomb dance, to practice corvid on raptor aggravation. What was more, it was a spring sky, blue but marked by clouds, both white in the sun and dark away from it. Like Irwin Hiller, the cameraman on the film Canterbury Tale, I was a bit loony about clouds. Clear skies were fine, but exciting clouds were better. To me, these skies and these majestic birds were a far-off spectacle. But to the birds themselves, this heaven was a playground, a hurrah of creation. And then something quite different, a raptor with a forked tail and lightly crooked wings. The red kite, Milvus milvus. I only learnt later that I had been filming one of the handful of pairs in Britain to have survived centuries of persecution and still breeding in the remote oakwoods of Wales. 50 years later, red kites cover the UK. Like cats, they seem to me symbols of prosperity, the possibility of newness, the potency of the resurrection idea. I end with a shot comprising hillside, clouds, and a speck of a bird, a genesis moment in the continuity of time. In 1975, we found ourselves living at Malden with a view over the estuary. I liked to watch the gulls shifting in the sky. The flat landscape was watery. A raptor went about its business over the marshes. The clouds were full of natural chiaroscuro, and nearby the waves on the shingle heralded great events by sounding a drum roll. by sounding a drum roll. By sounding a drum roll. Maggie was pregnant, and our cat had brought blessings. At the same time, I was a member of a union, a natural middle-class occupation at the time, and got wrapped up in a strike at my place of work. This is the picket line, and the person at the centre of things is an old friend, Steve. Yet the epiphany still took place. Our daughter was born in April, and the bluebirds came home to nest. That summer I drank in the sights of the countryside and of our house. A tree threshed in the wind. The evening sun went down. The clematis we had planted overtopped the wall. Then, going down to the river, we found sea walls, seagulls, sea cries. The peewit flapped against the sky, and the landscape dissolved itself into a pure, serene light. This is the evening sky at Malden, where the Saxons resisted the Northmen in vain, although they live eternally through poetry. I liked skying, so I filmed birds against the clouds. But here it is a butterfly leading me on. And then among the weeds I pursued a humdrum white butterfly. And at home in the warm evenings I filmed some undetermined noctuid and a bare light bulb to mesmerize it. That summer our baby learnt to smile. Then came a new challenge. Sunless autumn mists enveloped the dingy flats. Could I make a film out of this whiteout? That was a flock of geese. Then the camera moves from earth to sky. Next up is reeds in water. While you are looking at that, I am thinking of the mud banks and the causeway to nowhere. That was the causeway. These are piles of spoil on the mud. To come is a wooden box on the horizon. And even more mysterious, 2 piles in water. We ended the year on a high. Our little girl shared the outdoors sitting in a carrier. Marking the onset of winter was a sky of flesh pink and blood red. Through all these changing scenes, the moon waxed and waned. At the end of 1977, our second child was born, and I watched, further fascinated. In 1982 we made our first acquaintance with Norfolk, land of the Lotus Eaters, and moved there 4 years later. Let me begin by annihilating all that is thought, all that is made, to a green thought in a green shade. Perhaps it was as a result of the Green Movement, as it was called at the time, that I became preoccupied with trees. With my camera, this preoccupation bordered on an obsession. I had acquired a field guide to the trees of Britain and Northern Europe by Alan Mitchell, which had been published in 1974, and set my mind to learning. And then at Stourhead Gardens, when we visited them in July 1976, my heart was fired by the sight of its trees. Trees seem static, an unpromising subject for an energetic handheld camera. But there were ways of animating the subject and of stimulating the optic nerve. I could move the exposure from less light to more light to less light. I could intercut light exposures and dark exposures rapidly, as if the trees were lit up by my own flashes of lightning. I could continue to make rapid movements of the camera, as if I was using it like a paintbrush to create painterly smears on the retina of film. These punched holes mark something calmer entering my soul. In May 1980, I filmed these trees at Aidan Hall in Northamptonshire. By now I was using Agfacolor instead of Kodachrome, having concluded that this film stock was better at capturing green. And now I allowed the moving tree to animate the frame instead of my animating the camera. I was 32 years old, and my youthful energy was calming down. I was seeking and finding a measure of stillness, a proper place to contemplate the variety and majesty of trees. I was learning that trees live in a different dimension of time to our own, and that to enter this dimension was to gain some inkling of a different self. Casting the body's vest aside, my soul into the boughs does glide. There like a bird it sits and sings, then wets and combs its silver wings, and, till prepared for longer flight, waves in its plumes the various light. The leaf of the tulip tree is as follows: four-lobed, basal lobes perpendicular, ovate triangular, acute, terminal lobes spreading each side of indented, truncate end of leaf, middle of leaf nearly parallel-sided, corner lobes acute, slightly eared, 15 by 20 centimeters, broad cuneate to 10 centimeter petiole. Stourhead Garden is a paradise of trees. Aided by a guidebook and labels fixed to the trees, I noted them in the hope that the identifications would stick in my head. The Lawson cypress, the red oak, a golden yew, Japanese maples, dawn redwood, tree of heaven, and best of all the tulip tree, Liriodendron tulipifera, first planted at Stourhead in 1791. But since that visit the trees have escaped their names. The words float around my head unattached to the images on the retina. The memory of this visit is therefore imprecise, since I cannot put positive identifications to what my camera saw. What it saw is forms and colours, trees standing and growing in their own centuries. A painting might do them justice, a still photograph not. But a camera moving among them, from near and from far, can perhaps convey something of their presence on a lovely temperate summer's day. By 1984, France offered a quintessence of landscape, Arcadian almost. Through the dust marks you can still see the imposing elegance of this architecture, with pepper-pot towers as if from some medieval manuscript. They stand among trees artfully arranged by some 19th century landscape painter. The cattle come from Dutch painting of the 17th century. A new style is emerging. This diary film, which is among the last I made, is no longer frenetic in its pace and impulsive in its execution. Some of the time I am even using a tripod to ground the camera and thus free it from my nervous hands. Movement is kept at a minimum, except for the measured turning of the diaphragm. This controls the amount of light reaching the film, hence the passage of light to dark to light. I know now that I was on the verge of jettisoning moving pictures for a move into still photography, which is a quite different art. Was this stillness a retrograde step? I wonder now as I reflect in hindsight. I had a subject, places came into focus and then blurred with time, leaving these traces. What was being lost was not just my youth and the energy of youth, but a style. Yes, youth, energy and style were slipping away from me. Only now do I recognize my own particular metamorphosis. On the other hand, what arrests me now is that my camera's preoccupations were no dissimilar in 1984 to those when I started. In 1968 I had found myself drawn to the magnetic sun setting over a Scottish loch, an image in my mind that resolutely refused to fade. Here in France, 16 years later, I found myself drawn to the light waxing in the early morning and the light waning in the late evening, a rising and a falling and a rising. In the end I found what I had begun with, the sun slowly sinking in the evening sky. In May 1987, I filmed the children at Holcombe Beach, where Norfolk meets the North Sea. It was on this distant strand that I came to realize that the flywheel had come to rest. The heartbeat had slowed to normal. The image had begun to freeze. The waves coming in began to erase the past, and not just the past, but the illusion of desire and the evanescence of hope, leaving behind a residue of the eternal present. These images are not chains, but gossamer threads, traces of life, of thought, of vision, a quintessence of seeming that consumed all the reality of being. Was I then imperfect, disappointed, unfulfilled? By no means. These images embody perfection and fulfillment. This footage comes from the last reel of film I made. My notebook for 13th September 1987 reads, 16mm reel shot at Holcombe Meals, using black rectangles to block out sections of image when camera stopped down, and then exposing over blocked out section, also using coloured gels. Mostly double exposures in 5-foot sections, about 70 to 90 feet, also triple exposures. Existence is prose, film is poetry. On this shore I found I had abandoned the golden pomegranates of youth and come to a point of trance, an absorption into a state of meditative consciousness, a point of samadhi, of ecstasy. This stillness of earth, water and air I discovered was true to my own inner stillness, both of desire and of style. Hence these filmic inhalations and exhalations. Water and wave and air make paradise, and nirvana and bliss.